Hello and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. This is a special episode. I hope you're all doing great. Let me see who all is there in the live stream with us in the live chat. I can see Animish, Somalia Paul, who says, why this episode? Well, why this episode? Why today? Today, I think, is Wednesday, is it? It's a Wednesday. I'm traveling this weekend. I will not be available to do a live stream this weekend, and that's why I thought that I will do a special session just to offset my absence over the weekend. I'm traveling to Jaipur for the Jaipur Dialogues, and if any of you are going to be in Jaipur, I will be very, very pleased to meet you there. Right? So that's the reason why I am doing this special episode. So let's see who else we have. I have Somi Jain, who is here from Jaipur. Good to see you. Pearl Gupta, thank you very much. Nilay Srivastav, Mr. Jam, Mary Kane, good to see you, ma'am. Mary Kane. Aman Patania from Melbourne. Ayush Singh, Ranveer Rathore, I'm a painter. Suman Shekhar Sarangi, Animish, Adi Ayu, Ritik, Sasmit, Adi Ayu once again. Stone, Harsh says yo yo yo. Ritik, Imagine Space Time, Mr. Jam, I'm a painter, happy birthday. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who has wished me a happy birthday. It's not yet a belated birthday. My birthday is it's a forthcoming birthday. It's tomorrow. So anyway, thank you everyone. Who else do we have? Ashwani, Somi Jain, Himanshu Rajpurhoit, QWERTY, Q123, Sushrut, Atharva Thakur, Vortex, Abhishek Shukla from Kanpur, Rahul Himthani from Mumbai, Suman Chakrasarangi, Mithun SP, Namaste, McLovin, good to see you, Ashwani Versatile, Feel Strong Man, hello, Chetan Aradhya, hello, Rahul Das, Aromal Biju, Nabarita Das, good to see you as well. Himanshu Rajpur, AbhijitChavda Light, well, that's quite a name. Pearl Gupta is from Jaipur, all right, good to see you, sir. Stone, Sudhanshu Saudagar, Ram Ram. David Kundu, hello. Adway, hello. Shiven Singha, Sumit Agarwal, my English accent is not typical for India. Well, yeah, I know that. Manisha Cardoso, thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. Atharva Thakur, Alvin Rodriguez, Imagine Spacetime is an astrophysicist. Good to see you. Good to have an astrophysicist on board. Very good to see you. Imagine Spacetime. Sai Nurup from Hyderabad. Good to see you as well. Namaste. Kapil Lad, Himanshu from Chennai. Namrita Das, Avinash, Kai, Artsy Weeb, Jituraj, good morning. Well, good morning to you as well. Abhyuday Singh, Ayandatta. Priyanka Javalia, good evening, ma'am. Found me on the 17th of April 2021 through Ranveer Alabadia. Well, it was a good day. Thank you so much, ma'am. Good to have you. Kenel, Dhiren, Dhairya Lavanya. Hello. James, my good friend James is here. Always good to have you, James. I appreciate you, James. Geopolitical Dubey, Namaste. Jai Shri Ram. Harsh Vardhan. Thank you very much. Anuj Basin, Prashant Panwar, Atharva Thakur, Soldier Boy, and everyone else. Okay, now GGEZS, what's up? Manu Gowda, hello. Bruce Wayne is also here. Trader Insight, Aditya Garg. Okay, let's stop greeting everybody, otherwise it will go on all day. Darba Pritam from Hyderabad, hello. Bhargavi, good evening, and everyone else. Okay, so now let's take questions. I'm going to take questions that you all have asked in the comments. For a change, I usually do geopolitics live streams with super chats. Today, I will do it from the questions you've asked in the comments. So what's the first question for today? I've selected 20 questions. Hopefully, we can go through all of those. And if there is still time, I'll take some questions from the live chat as well. But let's begin with the questions I've selected from the comments. What's question one? Anonymous Scientist says, India and the US have extended their 10-year defense agreement. Will the US force it to use it to force India to purchase F-35s, which are trash? Well, they aren't exactly trash. They're superb aircraft, but they're not that great either. Okay, so is this agreement a gimmick, or does India actually get something beneficial from this agreement? So I have tried and attempted to locate the full text of the agreement, but it's not available in the public domain. So it's an agreement that the two nations have signed, but they have not released the text. I mean, the last time I tried to find it, I was unable to find the text. But we know kind of what the press releases have been like and what has been communicated to the public. So this agreement was signed just a few days ago, and what is it all about? It's about, so there's some you know broad aspects that have been agreed upon, and I'm sure there are details that you can drill down in. One is the two nations will continue their technological cooperation, their industrial cooperation and collaboration. That will continue. The two nations will continue to do sharing, engage in sharing of information and intelligence, right? So that will continue to whatever extent it was continuing. I'm not sure if there's going to be an enhancement of that, but it's going to continue. Then there's going to be the continuation of military interoperability. There's going to be the continuation of various kinds of joint exercises that happen a few times a year. That will continue. There's also reference to the Indo-Pacific. So the two nations have agreed that they are committed to their joint to maintaining open and free and rules based Indo-Pacific region and rules based world order, which Donald Trump is actively appending. But yeah, sure, okay, right. And they Yeah, so that sort of thing, free and open navigation of the Indo-Pacific region. um, we will oppose any coercive actions. We will reinforce deterrence, and we seek stability of the Indo-Pacific. That sort of verbiage has been used, and apparently there's a long-term roadmap for collaboration. And the two gentlemen who signed the agreement, that is India's Defense Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, and the US Secretary for War, Pete Hegseth, they have said that this agreement, this extension of the agreement, it represents some kind of new era in the relationship between the two countries, and it's vital for ensuring regional stability and the rules-based international order. So that's what I have gleaned from whatever I have seen. I'm sure there is more that I've missed, but I don't have the text or the summary or whatever in front of me. So that's essentially what it is. So now the question is this just a gimmick? Okay, will the US use this agreement to force India to purchase those F-35s that we don't want? Does India actually get something beneficial from this agreement? I think this agreement, this extension of the agreement, it sets a baseline in the relationship between the two nations. The relationship has been nosediving for the past several months. The US has imposed extremely heavy sanctions, tariffs on India, 50%, despite India purchasing less Russian oil than China, significantly less Russian oil now than China. But China gets a significant relaxation of tariffs, but India does not. So that's one issue. The other issue is that the US is adopting a maximalist approach when it comes to the trade negotiations for the whenever the trade deal happens, which is not happening right now. Right? There is that, and obviously the biggest issue is that the Americans are openly taking the side of Pakistan, blatantly, and all of that, and they are going ahead with all kinds of investments in Pakistan, and they are selling, various missiles and whatnot to Pakistan, the Saudi Pakistan deal, all of that. So India US relationships, the relations are nosediving. So this agreement seems to be something that sets a baseline that we can maintain. Right? I don't see India getting anything significantly beneficial from it beyond whatever we already have, the kind of relationship we already have. Is it a gimmick? It's not a gimmick. It's like, you're setting a bottom on the relationship, so it won't go below this, that sort of thing. And it will set some kind of framework through which the two nations can continue their relationship. You have various domains in which you have relations with a nation: the defense domain, the economic domain, trade, finance, whatever else. So this is one aspect of that. Will the US use this deal to force India to purchase F-35s? They can't force us to do anything. The F-35s will come with all kinds of strings attached that I have gone into in great detail, and that will have the effect of undermining the sovereignty of any nation that purchases the F-35. And it's not even that great of an aircraft. Obviously, it's a fifth generation fighter plane, no question about it. It's superior to anything India currently has, but it's not a good deal for India. The US can't force India to purchase those F-35s. They can't. So I don't see that happening. I think the day that India purchases F-35s is the day we will officially have announced that we have given up our sovereignty. Essentially, that's what it means. So I don't see that happening, and I hope that I'm absolutely 100% correct on this matter about the F-35s. Okay, next question. Okay, as an anonymous scientist, how do you see Trump accusing Pakistan of secretly testing nuclear weapons. Is the US not happy with its vassal state Pakistan, or is it just a public stunt? The US has accused North Korea, China, Russia also of doing the same thing. And Trump has justified his decision to restart nuclear tests by saying Pakistan, China, etc. are doing it. So is Pakistan testing nukes? Earthquakes in Pakistan after Operation Sindoor. Were these nuclear tests? Okay, so the big question over here is Trump has gone ahead and said, claimed, disclosed essentially that Pakistan and China also apparently have been conducting supercritical nuclear tests. So, what is this criticality? What is subcritical? What's supercritical? So, see, in nuclear weapons, advanced designs, you have chemical explosives that set off a series of events inside the nuclear weapon that eventually culminates with the fission or fission fusion reaction that gives off the output that a nuclear device gives you, right? So the initial, the trigger is an explosion through chemical explosives, and then you need to have a certain geometry and all that through which the various subcritical masses, nuclear masses, they come together and set off the fission reaction that may only be a fission reaction or may set off a secondary fusion reaction, etc., etc. We'll not go into the engineering. So you can test nuclear weapons design by just igniting the chemical explosives and not having actual nuclear fuel in there. So that's a subcritical test essentially. A supercritical test is one in which the nuclear fuel ignites. You have a fission or fusion or both kind of reaction. So there's a global moratorium right now in place that no one's going to conduct nuclear tests, and as part of this moratorium, you are allowed to do subcritical tests. So Trump is saying that China and Pakistan and China are doing supercritical tests, nuclear tests, which is actual nuclear explosions, right? And he says that they drill very deep underground so that you just get some mild vibrations and so on. That's what he has been claiming. That's what he has claimed. That's what essentially is disclosed. The US president has disclosed. See, when the president of the United States says something, you cannot take it lightly. You have to take it very seriously. So he has disclosed that Pakistan has been conducting nuclear tests, and he's also said China is doing it. Maybe even Russia. I'm not sure. So then the question is, what about those earthquakes that were detected around the time of Operation Sindoor, the 3-day war, May 7, 8, 9, 10, around that time, 8, 9, whichever the dates were. And even after that event, when the operation was paused, there have been more seismic events in Pakistan. A cluster of these happened in Balochistan, Pakistan-occupied Balochistan, and a bunch of these happened in Pakistan-occupied Punjab. So what were these things? So I went ahead, I think once I did it live on this show, and I showed you that, some of these earthquakes, their origin is about 10, 12 kilometers underground, sometimes even 100 kilometers underground. Now, the deepest hole that human beings have drilled, it's in the vicinity of like 10, 11 kilometers deep. It's very difficult to drill holes that are that deep. So does Pakistan have the engineering capability to drill 10-kilometer deep holes just for nuclear tests? I doubt it very much. Essentially, they don't have it. Then what's the deal? But Trump is claiming they have been doing nuclear tests. What's it mean? It could very well mean that this data that's available in the public domain, it's falsified data. Maybe the test happened only 500 meters down, maybe 1 kilometer down, but it is being shown as something that's 10, 12, 15, whatever kilometers down. These agencies or organizations that put out this data, they can very well falsify it. It's not the Indian government that's putting it out. It's this data essentially comes from Western agencies and organizations. So it's possible that they may be falsifying it and claiming it's 10, 12, 15 kilometers down when it's actually just maybe perhaps just half a kilometer down, maybe a kilometer down. That's possible. You can't trust all this information that's out there, all this data that's put out in the public domain. You can't trust it. You can't. I'm not saying it's all false, but some of it can be selectively falsified. Understand that. I'm sure the government of India also has its seismic detectors and whatever else is required, and I'm sure they're aware of it, but they will not go ahead. The government of India will not go ahead and disclose this in public. Trump has done it. Very good. Fantastic. So it's possible that the Pakistanis were testing some nuclear devices. It's possible. Now the question is, these nuclear devices, who owns these? Has Pakistan actually developed nuclear weapons? Or are these nuclear weapons simply devices that have been given to them on loan by somebody? I doubt very much that the Pakistani nuclear scientists have the capability to develop a full-fledged nuclear weapons program. Maybe, look, it's not that difficult actually. Okay, all you need is fissile material, uranium, a certain quantity of uranium, and I think any half decent engineer can rig up a device that will, you know, implode two subcritical masses of uranium and make them supercritical, and you will have some kind of an explosion. So I'm sure the Pakistanis tested some nuclear devices in 1998 or whenever it was, but I'm pretty sure the devices they have today are not theirs. Maybe somebody else has given these devices on loan, most likely the United States. So if the Pakistanis were testing weapons, did the Americans give them the green light to do that? See, first of all, if these devices are American devices, then I can assure you that just like the case with the UK, the big red button does not sit in Rawalpindi or Islamabad; it sits somewhere else. So if the tests happen, maybe it's the Americans who have tested this. Uh, there's all kinds of options open. I doubt very much if Pakistan, if it does have nuclear weapons, I doubt that they have sovereignty over those. Most likely, they are just placed in Pakistani territory for counterbalancing purposes vis-a-vis India, maybe even some other country. uh, so if Trump has made a disclosure that Pakistan has been testing nuclear weapons, we have to take it very seriously. Trump has this track record of saying all kinds of things, some of which or many of which may not be entirely correct. But in this case, we have to take him very seriously. The government of India has to take him very, very seriously. Um, so, so does it mean the Americans are unhappy with Pakistan, their vassal state? Why have they accused Pakistan of doing this? And you will see that Pakistan has not responded at all to this claim by Trump, to this disclosure by Trump. See, if Trump had made a statement about India, India would have immediately gone ahead and made a public statement, either confirming or denying what Trump said. Pakistan hasn't done that. They have been quiet. What does it mean? Is the US unhappy with Pakistan? No, the US is very pleased with Pakistan. Pakistan is an obedient lapdog. Sometimes you beat up the lapdog, and the lapdog still comes to you and does what you say. So it's just the US wants to restart nuclear weapons testing, so they want to take some names. See, China is the adversary. Russia is also a big adversary, but Pakistan is a loyal lapdog right now because it's under leash. It's leashed right now. So that's why they have also thrown Pakistan, this accusation at Pakistan. Then Pakistan will just take it. Pakistan will not say a word against Trump. So that's the deal. Okay, further about the nuclear deal. Somi and Rushabh Tare. Why is the US talking about testing nuclear weapons? What does the country gain by testing them repeatedly? Is it information? Is it checking that they are working just fine or something else? My thoughts on Trump's announcement to restart nuclear tests. Is it in response to the Burevestnik missile test by Russia, an escalation of war in Ukraine, along with the continuous rise of China? Or do they truly want to start a nuclear age like they did in the Cold War by dropping nukes on Japan? Well, the dropping nukes on Japan happened before the Cold War, but anyway. So why is the US talking about testing nuclear weapons? Why has Trump announced that the US is gonna resume testing nuclear weapons? Why is that? Look, nuclear weapons have to be tested. Any weapons that you have to be tested to validate the design, to validate it's working fine, to find flaws and defects in those weapons, and then you rectify that and test again to see if the flaw has now been fixed. Maybe you want a certain amount of yield in terms of kilotons of TNT or megatons of TNT, but maybe it's not exactly the yield is not what you expect. Maybe it's too little, maybe it's too much. So you want to fine tune the weapon. For these things, you have to test it, right? So when did the last nuclear weapons tests happen? 1998, India. After that, North Korea has been testing nuclear weapons. France tested sometime in the 1990s, and the US tested some time ago. The Russians tested before that. So it's been like 30 or so years since the West has tested nuclear weapons. And maybe they have come up with more advanced designs that they can kind of do some modeling through supercomputers and whatnot, but you actually, at the end of the day, you have to actually test it out. So maybe the US has decided that it's time to test out the new designs and test that the old ones are still working as we expect. Makes sense. Makes sense. But you can't just start testing just like that unilaterally. So you have to invent a just cause for whatever action you're going to take. If the action is very potentially destabilizing, you need to justify. So that's why they are blaming other countries. Maybe China, Russia, Pakistan are actually testing it. It's very possible. If the US president says that, we have to take it seriously. So what does the country gain by testing nuclear weapons? Not repeatedly. It's been 30 or so years. It's been a long gap. It makes sense to test them now. It's been too long since you tested. Whatever weapons you have to keep on testing them periodically. India conducts missile tests periodically, doesn't it? Even the old missiles, like the Prithvi missiles and the older Agni missiles, we test them once or twice a year just to ensure. You take a random missile out of the stockpile and you test it so that statistically everything is working fine. So the US, obviously, it makes sense for them to test nuclear weapons. It's been a long time since any of these were tested. So it looks like Trump has decided that now is the time, or maybe he has been given the advice that now is the time to resume nuclear testing. So it's not like they are trying to escalate some. Is it in response to the Burevestnik missile test? No, it's not that. The Burevestnik is a missile. It's not a nuclear weapon. It is a missile that is nuclear capable. It can carry a nuclear warhead, and it's a nuclear propelled missile. Okay, it most likely has a nuclear powered ramjet engine. So the propulsion itself is nuclear, which gives it theoretically unlimited range. It can fly for months. It can even be recalled without actually hitting a target. That's the deal with the Burevestnik missile. So that obviously is something that the US currently doesn't have. They had something called Project Pluto or something in the 1960s, but they shelved it. Maybe it was seen as too provocative. Maybe it was seen as not necessary once the ballistic missiles of the US became sufficiently accurate. So the US isn't trying to start a nuclear age. We are already in the nuclear age. So many nations, like 8, 9 nations, have nuclear weapons. So the US just wants to test maybe its newer designs, maybe test the validity of the older designs, and they are okay if other countries follow suit. Because if the US tests, I assure you, Russia will test. China also will most likely test. And there's a moderate probability that India will also test. Makes sense for India to test. So that's the deal. And I would say that if the US tests, India should also go ahead and test whatever needs to be tested. Because see, we tested in 1998. I'm sure we have enhanced those designs. That's 27 years ago that we tested. By those nuclear weapons that we tested at that time, I'm sure we have far more advanced nuclear weapons designs today, but those have not been tested, right? So if the US tests, it makes a lot of sense for us to validate our own nuclear weapons designs, the new ones. And how do you do that? You do it by testing those. Raj Akash Kumar says, Trump said the US needs to test nuclear weapons as Pakistan and China and other countries are doing it. Okay, so that the reply to Russia for the nuclear fuel missile Burevestnik. And will Russia and India start their nuclear tests? Currently, India is conducting Operation Trishul. Army, Navy, Air Force are all doing practice operations in various parts of India, several parts of India. And yesterday, ISRO launched a heavy communications satellite. What's cooking? First of all, let's talk about ISRO, the ISRO angle. ISRO, a couple of days ago, launched the heaviest communication satellite we've launched indigenously, right? Is it somehow related to all of this? I do not think so. See, when you launch a heavy communication satellite, that satellite has to be constructed. You cannot put it together in 2 days. It takes a few months to put it together. There are lots of different agencies involved in building communication satellite, which essentially is you could say a military satellite, naval satellite, yeah. And so you need to do all of that. You need to integrate it with the fairing of the rocket. You have to do stress testing, vibration testing, and the rocket itself has to be put together. ISRO is not like SpaceX that we have 20 rockets that just need to be assembled in 2 days and we are good to go. No, ISRO, I think it's building every rocket on demand. If you go to SpaceX headquarters, you will see like 50 rockets just lying around in a properly designated area, and those can be very rapidly put together and launched because they're launching like a rocket a week, right? And they have reusable rockets and whatnot. ISRO is not like that. So this rocket launch, this satellite launch, that must have been planned months in advance, right? So it's not in response to what's happening. First of all, we have to understand that. Now, Operation Trishul is very interesting, right? That's going on, and it's been announced very recently, and Army, Navy, Air Force, everyone's involved in that. There are various NOTAMs that have been issued, notice to airmen, where you're giving a warning that we are conducting live firing exercises and military exercises in this area. Everyone, civilian traffic, commercial traffic, stay out. If something happens, it's not our fault. We are giving you a warning in advance. That's a NOTAM. So multiple NOTAMs have been issued. So is Operation Trishul in response to what's happening here? The nuclear issue, the Pakistan issue, the fact that Operation Sindoor is paused, it is not ended, it could resume. Operation Trishul is very interesting. Maybe it is a statement. Maybe it is a statement not just to Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't matter. Maybe it's a statement to Pakistan's master or masters that, what, we are fully ready. It's also possible that India may be preparing to, if required, conduct nuclear weapons tests. It's also possible. Look, I am not putting out any classified information in the public domain. This is just speculation. Okay. But it's also possible that if the US tests, we should be ready to test immediately before the US can say, what, nobody else test, and you're not allowed to. If they test and we find out through our seismic detectors, then we should immediately test. So maybe that's also part of what's happening. Maybe Operation Trishul is part of the readiness for maybe a nuclear weapons test, if required. We will not be able to test nuclear weapons without the US first testing them. If we go ahead and unilaterally test nuclear weapons, the Americans will impose sanctions on us. No question about it. The West collectively will impose various sanctions on us. But if the US tests first, and then we go ahead and say that, what, if you're testing big brother, we can also test, then it will be, it will make less sense for them to, it will give them less justification to impose sanctions on us. So I would say that maybe we are getting ready for all kinds of things right now. There's the Pakistan issue angle. Operation Sindoor, it's been several months now. And the longer we wait, the stronger Pakistan gets, because it is going to get supplies, arms, ammunition, weapon systems, all of that from the West, from Saudi Arabia, is going to be able to re-augment its defenses. So the longer we wait, the less advantageous it is for us. So maybe something is brewing, maybe nothing is brewing. I have no idea. But yeah, it's interesting that this very large scale set of military exercises is being conducted right now by us, by India. Okay, multiple questions about the Quad. Amisha says, Abhinav says, if India is replaced by the Philippines in the Quad, will it be a significant victory for China? Amisha says, what are your predictions for the Quad? Will the Quad come back to relevance, or is the Quad in coma now? Somi says, how do you see India being dethroned by the Philippines in the Quad? What does the US gain from it? It is practically a coalition of the US and its vassals. Why form such a group that has no value? Has the US accepted that China is a new hegemon? And Geopolitics Dubai says, does the Quad hold no relevance anymore? How can the Philippines replace Bharat in the region? Does the US no longer see Bharat as necessary to counter China? Okay, Quad. I'm sure you are all aware of something called SAARC, the so-called South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. When was the last time there was a SAARC summit? Roughly a decade ago, right? SAARC is defunct today. It still exists on paper, but it's no longer active. Why is it not active? Because we killed it. If a SAARC summit is organized and we don't turn up, SAARC is finished, right? India is the major nation in SAARC. The Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis can hold a so-called SAARC summit, but if India is not present, it's over. So SAARC has been killed off by us. Similarly, the Quad still exists on paper, but it won't continue. It like Amisha says, it's kind of going to be in coma, just like SAARC is. So what has happened? Has India been replaced by the Philippines in the Quad? Has India been dethroned by the Philippines? So first of all, the US hasn't said no one has said that in the Quad we are removing India and we're putting Philippines there. No such statement has been made, right? So now the US is creating a new kind of alignment. The US, Japan, the Philippines, maybe Australia is part of that, and whoever else. So it's kind of like a substitution for India and the Quad, and it's a new bunch of nations that comes up. Now, understand, was India given a throne when we were in the Quad? Was being in the Quad something of great prestige and great value to us? Was it like wearing a crown? Was it like sitting in a throne? It wasn't. What was the why did the Quad exist? The Quad existed to counterbalance China's hegemonic imperialistic activities in the Indo-Pacific region, the South China Sea region, and overall the Asia Pacific region. Right? That's why the US, two of its vassals, Japan and Australia, came together, and we also got added to that because it made sense for us also to be part of such a grouping, so that we could, so India's number one threat. If you look at our threat perception, our threat horizon, the major challenge, the major threat for India is China, which is about 3-4 times more powerful than India overall, right? And China has been a very hostile nation. We know the history. I don't need to go back into the history. I don't need to retell the history between India and China. And China has been the aggressor. India has never provoked China. And China still claims Indian territory. And China continues its infrastructure building activities in Chinese occupied Tibet and whatnot. So India clearly faces a threat. And if you have nations like the US, Australia, Japan that you can team up with to counter the Chinese threat, then it makes sense. And that's why India was part of the Quad. After all the incidents that happened in the past decade, in the 2010s, the Daulat Beg Oldie incident, the whatever else incidents, the Galwan incident, which was very bad, and so on. So made sense for India to be part of that grouping. But now things have changed significantly. The US now is piling on the pressure on India. The relationship has nosedived, right? The US is taking the side of Pakistan. Pakistan no longer has China as big daddy. Pakistan has slipped out of China's grasp, and it's in the US lap now today. So things have changed, not just for India, for China also. And so now India and China seem to be having some kind of détente, some kind of rapprochement. Of course, we are not blindly trusting anything. We understand what China represents, but we are taking it very cautiously. And as such, now that the US is treating India as an adversary, now that the US seeks to contain India very openly and overtly, and also China, that's why India, China, and Russia seem to be on the same boat now. So it makes no sense for India to continue its Quad activities. Right? The Quad is dead. The Americans killed Quad. We didn't kill the Quad. And when we were in the Quad, it was not like we were sitting on a throne. The Americans simply saw one utility for India, that was as a counterbalance to China. And India was not enough to counterbalance China. That's why they enlisted Japan and Australia as well in the matter. So essentially, the US regarded India even at that time as a pawn on the geopolitical chessboard. It was not a gesture of friendship. It was a matter of convenience. So we have not been dethroned by the Philippines. The Philippines cannot replace India, but India is now an adversary for the US. That's how they see us. We don't see them as an adversary. We would like to continue the cooperation, the collaboration, the good relationship, the excellent relationship that we had, and we would like to make it even better, but they see it differently, and it makes sense strategically from their perspective. So things have changed. Has the US accepted China as a new hegemon? They have kind of tacitly accepted that China is now the hegemon in the Eastern Hemisphere. Kind of, they have done that, right? So the Philippines has not replaced Bharat. The equations have changed. The Quad is now on ice. It's in cold storage, and it most likely won't be revived for the foreseeable future, if ever. So the US is now exploring a different set of geopolitical alignments and equations, and that's where the Philippines comes in. The US has essentially kind of, you could say, given up the Eastern Hemisphere to China, right? The US would still very much want India. They would still like very much India to become its vassal, but that's not showing any signs of happening unless there is some kind of a change in New Delhi, which the US would like to engineer. Well, that's a whole different story. So that is the deal with the Quad. The Quad still exists, but it is on ice. It is in cold storage. It is in a coma, like Abhisha says. And this Philippines thing is a whole different entity. It's a different alignment, different grouping. Yasharth Tiwari says the chaos that's happening around the world, is it a sign of world war going to happen in the near future? McLevin says India has issued multiple NOTAMs from November all the way to January, conducting six major military exercises simultaneously. Pakistan has also issued a NOTAM, and Pakistan is allegedly receiving weapons deliveries from the United States. Yeah, missiles and whatnot, AM, RAM, and so on, whatever. Bangladesh is receiving weapons and defense systems from Turkey. The US is also involved in Bangladesh, as we know very well. Trump has ordered he has ordered the resumption of nuclear testing in the US. Central banks across the world have started buying a lot of gold recently. Do all these factors indicate that we are preparing for a world war? We are preparing. We are going to, this is most likely the indication that there's going to be a tremendous amount of global upheaval, turmoil, and instability. We are seeing a situation in Sudan. We're seeing Africa being destabilized. We have Ukraine going on. There is the Hamas Gaza issue that is kind of simmering down now. And there are other issues. There's the India Pakistan thing that has flared up now, right? And so much more. So this is a sign that the world order is changing very rapidly, and it does not necessarily indicate a world war that will come up very soon. The US and China, none of the major nations wants a world war. That's okay. We're back. Brief glitch. So the point is, nobody wants a world war. If there's a world war, it will ruin everyone, including the US, including China, Russia, India, and everybody else. It will not just ruin everyone, it will destroy the world. No one wants that. What we're going to see is geo-economic turmoil. We're going to see maybe multiple clashes at various flashpoints. That could erupt. That could happen. And when you have so much instability that you foresee on the horizon, especially geo-economic instability, what do? You go for gold. Gold is the only store of value, economic value, that is that is bankable, essentially, long term. uh, so when you foresee a recession, when you foresee geopolitical, geo-economic instability, when you foresee potentially chaos in the world, the banks, major central banks, will start buying up a lot of gold, right? So we are seeing the decoupling, essentially, of the world order. We're seeing the emergence of the new Cold War. The battle lines of the Cold War are being drawn. India is still, the US still would like India to be on their side, but maybe India will be drawn into RIC, which will be a very strange and very new kind of grouping for us to be in. It will potentially be quite uncomfortable, and we'll have to see how to navigate that. Um, and so on. So the US is obviously encircling India. It seeks to contain India via East Pakistan, West Pakistan, maybe Project K, Coquitlam for Christ, maybe so much more. All of that is happening. This doesn't necessarily indicate a world war. It indicates a bifurcation of the world order. The US doesn't want a multipolar world order, neither does China. So there's going to be instability as the world order bifurcates, and everyone's going to have to make a choice which side you're on. Are you on the western side or the eastern side? And if you're on whatever side, you have to perhaps accept someone as your overlord, as your hegemon, as your suzerain, right? Maybe India may also be forced to make tough choices at some point in time. So that's the situation. We are expecting instability, increased instability, maybe recession, maybe multiple flashpoints, breaking out into localized wars. Hopefully, not more than that. And that's why we are seeing all the major central banks buying up a lot of gold. So hopefully, no world war. That's the last thing we want, but definitely instability. Ritik RPG says, in Trump's post stating that the G2 will be convening shortly, is he signaling a shift in how the United States views its relationship with China, potentially treating China more as an equal partner rather than a junior or rival partner? And Shub says, is a bipolar world order inevitable with two poles, US and China? Will India and Russia become vassals of China, given that the level of technological advancements China are doing, which will make Chinese military extremely superior compared to India and Russia? Right. So Trump said that G2 will be convening shortly. The Chinese made no such statements. But there's been this talk in the West since the early 2000s that the US and China need to, since China is emerging as a major power, the US and China need to be the two poles in the emerging world order. China became very significant, you could say 2008, 2007, 2008 onwards, after the global financial crisis, in which China did a lot to actually stabilize the US dollar for their own reasons, obviously. And after 2012, once Mr. Xi Jinping came to power, the China, you could see a very different China going forward. And China obviously is a very major economy now, the second largest economy, and technologically very advanced. Maybe in some areas, potentially even a significant challenger rival, maybe even more advanced than the US in some specific areas. So the G2, so the US wants a bipolar world order, and China will also be very happy with a bipolar world order in which it controls half of the world, right? Neither the US nor China wants a multipolar world order, which is messy. They don't want a third pole of India, Russia, and the global south, or maybe four poles, like Russia as a pole of its own with its own set of nations, which cooperates with China as well as India and the global south. No one wants that sort of mess. So the US and China both seek a G2 situation, a Cold War situation, where the rivalry can be managed. See, in the 20th century, the US and the USSR were major adversaries with massive amounts of nuclear weapons pointed at each other, but they also cooperated in a variety of ways to manage the relationship and keep the tensions from spilling over beyond what anyone wanted, right? So that's what the US and China wants. And now the US seems to have resigned itself to the fact that China is now, well, almost a peer equal to the US. China doesn't have any of the advantages in the power projection domain that the US has. Very similar to the situation of the USSR, right? So China faces all those problems, all those issues, all those drawbacks. But China is bound, it's hamstrung by these issues, by the island chains and so much more. But China has some advantages that the USSR did not have: technological advancement and a far better system of governance than the USSR. And so it's a different situation, but a similar situation. So the US, it seems to have now decided that it's going to withdraw into the Western Hemisphere, and it's going to defend the Western Hemisphere from Chinese encroachments. And it kind of is giving away the Eastern Hemisphere to some extent to China. It still wants to have as much, it's not giving up its power projection capabilities in the Eastern Hemisphere. It's not giving up its occupation of Japan or South Korea. It's not giving up its possession, you could say, of Australia, of all the assets it has cultivated and created in Southeast Asia. It is not giving up East or West Pakistan. It also seeks to expand its footprint through Bagram Air Base. It seeks that. It seeks to pressurize and contain India, maybe even turn India into vassal. So it's not giving up any of that. But it's the US is now clear that China is the dominant power in the Eastern Hemisphere, despite all of this. So it's going to contain China. It's going to contain India. It's going to try and pressurize India into becoming a vassal. If India refuses, it will try and do a regime change in India. All of that is going on. And if India somehow refuses and succeeds in not becoming a vassal of the US, does it mean that India will have to become a Chinese vassal? That also, well, if Mr. Modi stays in power, and if whenever he steps down, at whatever point in time, maybe 5-10 years, whatever it is, and if there is continuity in the political and geopolitical policy of the US, of India, then India will find itself in a strange situation with China also. China will want India to be a vassal. And just like we are saying no to the US, we'll say no to China also. So we could face a lot of pressure from multiple fronts. We could face instability. We could face wars. We could face proxy wars, resumption of proxy wars, east, west, whatever. All of that. So, like I said, we are entering a period of significant geopolitical instability. As the world order rearranges itself, there's going to be a lot of instability. It's like an earthquake happening. Global tectonic plates are changing and shifting, and that causes earthquakes. It's like that. So India has the choice of either becoming a US vassal or going into RIC as as a junior partner of China, or staying completely sovereign, which is the ideal situation. But it is a course of action that will be difficult. Next 20 years will be difficult. Ideally, that's what happens. And we then emerge as a major economy into 15, 20 years, and then it will be very hard for others to bully us. But that's going to take a lot of fortitude and a lot of hard choices and a lot of insignificant amounts of various kinds of pain. That's where we are. Rushabh Thare says, why is the US threatening Venezuela with an attack? Is it just because of Maduro or oil game through which the US wants more control over global energy, or any other plans to dominate South America? McLevin says, Venezuela's President Maduro has asked Russia for urgent military support, and there are reports of Russian arms appearing in Venezuela. This seems exactly like the Cuban missile crisis. Guess history does repeat itself. Okay, so in the 20th century, we had a nation in the Western Hemisphere, in the Caribbean region, that is Cuba, that was aligned with the USSR. And Cuba, if you look at the map, we haven't opened the map today. Let's do that now. Where is map? We open map. Give me a second, and we shall visit Cuba through the map. Okay, where is map? We put on screen. Right here we are. So if we look at Cuba, you will see it's right at, in the US's backyard. Gulf of Mexico, which is now the Gulf of America, that sort of thing, right? So here is Cuba, this large island nation, right in the US's backyard, and it remained sovereign. It did not bend into cave into the US, and a whole truckload of sanctions were applied on Cuba. And as a result, Cuba, its economy froze, and it's still, if you visit Cuba, it will feel like you've stepped into the 1950s. That's how it feels. But Cuba remained independent with the help of the USSR. And it still has remained more or less sovereign nation, even though now, it's open to US tourists and whatnot. So it's now a little different. When it comes to Venezuela, so what happened in the 1960s, the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, is that the USSR had placed ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads in Cuba. That was seen as a direct threat by the US, and an immediate threat right in their backyard. So when the US places nuclear weapons in various countries, like, for example, Turkey and so on, they say that the Russians should not see it as a direct threat, while they saw Russian missiles and warheads in Cuba as an immediate threat that almost led to nuclear war. So that's the Cuban Missile Crisis issue. Now, is Venezuela, the situation right now, similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis? It is not, because there are no Russian ballistic missiles or nuclear warheads in Venezuela as of today, as far as we know. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand that it's not exactly the same thing. And Russia today is not as powerful as the USSR used to be, comparatively to the US in the 1960s or in the 20th century during the Cold War. So then the question is, why is the US threatening Venezuela with attack? And why is Venezuela urgently asking for urgent military support from Russia? What's the deal? See, Venezuela, Mr. Maduro, he sees himself as a socialist. He sees himself as someone who opposes US hegemony. So the US historically, for the longest time, since the 19th century, has had something called the Monroe Doctrine, which is a term that's supposedly obsolete today, but it's still very much in force. The Monroe Doctrine says that nobody will be allowed, no nation apart from the US will be allowed to play any colonial games in the Americas, whether it's North America, South America. Essentially, it means that the US will be the overlord of all the nations in this region, whether it's Canada, whether it is Mexico, whether it's the Central American nations like Panama, etc., or the Latin American nations like Brazil, Argentina, Cuba, Chile, and so on, Honduras, Uruguay, etc. But Venezuela is right there, and Venezuela is not aligned with the US. Venezuela is aligned with the global South and with Russia. And as such, the US doesn't get to decide Venezuela's economic policy, its foreign policy, and so on, the way the US very strongly, let's say, influences the economic and foreign policies of the other nations in the region. It's not the case with Venezuela. So Venezuela is sovereign to a large extent from the US, right? Not 100% sovereign, but significantly more sovereign than the other nations in the region. In Venezuela, why is it important? Because it has these huge reserves of oil that makes it an extremely important nation. So the US would like to change the situation. They would like Venezuela to become just like any other South American nation or any nation in the Americas and be aligned completely with the US. And the US should decide or guide this nation about what kind of economic and foreign policy it should have. Essentially, a vassal state. That's what they would like Venezuela to be. And since Venezuela has resisted this for such a long time, the Americans have imposed all kinds of sanctions on Venezuela, which has really crippled the Venezuelan economy. And then you blame it on socialism, that you are so poor and you have such terrible circumstances because of socialism, when in reality it's because of the sanctions. So now maybe the US wants to, like I said, they have decided to play defense in the Western Hemisphere, and they will kind of allow China to dominate to some extent the Eastern Hemisphere. So if the US wants to play defense in the Western Hemisphere, they have to control the whole of the Western Hemisphere. They control all the Western European nations. We understand that very well through NATO, through the EU, and so on. But they don't control Venezuela. And Brazil also is an issue, but we'll not talk about Brazil right now. Brazil is an issue to some extent. So what do you do with Venezuela? You effect a regime change. You first give the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, to a lady who you have cultivated, and who you would like to be the next leader in Venezuela, just like Mohamed Yunus, a former Nobel Prize winner, is now the face of the Bangladeshi military regime. Similarly, they would like this lady, I don't remember her name, they would like her to be the face of a new puppet government in Venezuela. That is the situation, right? So it looks like the US may potentially, sometime soon, perhaps, invade Venezuela. Yeah, there is augmented US naval activity in the region. Maybe the US is preparing for an invasion of Venezuela. And Venezuela's terrain is kind of challenging and all, but the US can, I'm sure, over time deal with it, unless Venezuela is able to defend itself properly, for which it will need significant supplies of arms, ammunitions, military systems, and so on. And that's why the Venezuelan government, Mr. Maduro's government, have requested Russia for urgent military support. And maybe, perhaps, Russian arms are appearing in Venezuela. So it's not exactly like the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it's kind of similar to it in various ways. So why does the US want Venezuela? First of all, to align the whole of the Western Hemisphere with the US. And secondly, obviously, oil, very important. If you take Venezuela, you get to control the way the oil is sold, to whom it's sold, to whom it's not sold, what price, and so on. So that way you can control more of the global oil supply, which is obviously very welcome if you're the US. So that, in a nutshell, is what is happening. What will happen? Can't say. Hopefully there is no warfare and such, because it will be disastrous for an already devastated country, a country that's devastated by sanctions. But let's see. The US is fully capable of taking Venezuela over and effecting a regime change. That's fully, the US is definitely capable of that, very much so, unless the Russians get involved and bolster the defensive capabilities of the nation, in which case the US may perhaps reconsider if Russia is able to supply sufficient arms, ammunition, and whatnot to Venezuela. That's where we are. Saral Sharma says, finally, we are making a civilian aircraft. There's a deal between HAL and a Russian company. What are my views about this? Okay, we are talking about the Sukhoi Superjet 100. What does this aircraft look like? So it's an aircraft that it's a reasonably smallish aircraft. It can accommodate about 105 passengers. It's a passenger jet. What does it look like? Let's quickly take a look at that. Let's go to our friend Google and Google the Sukhoi Superjet 100. Sukhoi Superjet 100. What's it look like? So this is what it looks like. It's a narrow body aircraft. Passengers about 100-ish, I would say. And it is a twin jet aircraft. And that's the deal. So now that we know what this aircraft looks like, what's this deal that we have between India and Russia, between HAL and this Russian company? I forget the name of the company. You can look it up. The deal is that India will manufacture between 75 to 100 of these aircraft in India. What kind of manufacturing is the question? What kind of manufacturing? Are we going to import kits and assemble those in India with screwdrivers? Not quite. We're going to actually manufacture the aircraft in India. We're going to manufacture various components and parts of the aircraft, like the body of the aircraft and various systems of the aircraft. All of these will be locally manufactured in India. So we are essentially manufacturing the majority of the aircraft in India itself. We'll procure the raw materials and create and manufacturing everything in-house with a license from Russia. So licensed production. But the jet engines won't be manufactured in India. Those will come from Russia. And these are Russian. It's an advanced version of the previous jet engine they were using. So what this will do is that it will give us an aircraft that has nothing that's manufactured in the West or coming from the West. So in the case of the West in the future, imposing restrictions, sanctions, whatever on India, we're going to be able to have these aircraft that are non-Western. So for example, if you are using Boeings or Airbuses or whatever, if the US decides, they can stop supplying spare parts for servicing and whatnot to India. In that case, we have to ground our fleets, right? See, Airbus is a French company, but the US can arm twist the French. We know that very well. Even though France is the only nation in the EU and NATO that is way more sovereign than the others, a quasi-independent foreign policy and whatnot, but still. So if we manufacture this entirely non-Western passenger aircraft in India, it's great for us, right? So it will be, what is the range that it has? It's a range of about 3 to 4,000, maybe 4,500 kilometers, right? So that's good enough for India. Domestic air traffic, right? Various second tier, third tier airports that we wish to connect through the Udan scheme, etc., will be able to cover these with these Sukhoi Superjets. So it's fantastic. It's, I think, the first time we will be manufacturing an aircraft almost entirely in India after many decades. So overall, it's fantastic, and that will give us a lot of technological know-how, and maybe in the future we can augment the aircraft, maybe with Russian permission, license, whatever, and produce a new family of aircraft based on this one, maybe larger aircraft with higher capacity, whatever. So I would say it's fantastic. I'm glad to see that this is happening finally, right? It's a very positive development for us. It's great for India-Russia relations. It's great for India's Atmanirbharta campaign. It's great for Indian manufacturing. It's great for India's commercial air sector and so much more. Overall, it's a fantastic deal. And the great thing is that we're not assembling kits in India. We're going to be manufacturing the aircraft almost entirely in India, apart from the engines. And about the engines, maybe we can see about that also what to do. Maybe we can eventually even manufacture the engines in India, which is not part of the current deal. But even that could happen in the future. The doors of possibility are always open. So I see this as a fantastic development overall. Okay, we have to discuss this, don't we? Real Painter says, will Mamdani kiss the ring? Real Painter again says, Zohram Kwame Mamdani has won the New York City mayoral elections by 50% preference vote. Okay, I've not seen the margin of victory, but he has won. Okay, good. And he has also quoted the magnificent Shri Mr. Nehruji in his winning speech. And Hindutva Rises says, is Zohran Mamdani becoming mayor going to affect India-US relations? Or will Zohran be subordinate to Trump? I don't think Trump is a big fan of socialism and doesn't want it to exist in the US. What is the deal? So Zohran Mamdani has won the New York City mayoral elections. And the Indian media is right now going gaga. Indian origin Zohran Mamdani has won. Haha, great, wonderful, fantastic. So in what way is he Indian origin? His mother is Meera Nair. She's a Punjabi. She's a very famous, world famous filmmaker, film director, right? Meera Nair. And his father is also Indian origin. He's an Indian origin Muslim, I think Gujarati speaking Muslim, who was born in Mumbai, but he was in Uganda or something. And he moved to the US probably in the 1970s or something like that. So both his parents are of Indian origin. And that obviously makes Zohran Mamdani an Indian origin American. Now he has won the New York mayoral elections. He is a far left guy. His ideology is leftist ideology, and when he in his victory speech he apparently quoted the great magnificent Sri Jawaharlal Nehru ji, and that has pleased a lot of Indians, right? Um, right. So the question is, first question is, will Mamdani kiss the ring? What do we mean by kiss the ring? So kiss the ring is this analogy I had used sometime late last year, during the US presidential campaign, in which I had said that if Trump wins the presidency of the US, then it will mean that he has kissed the ring of the deep state. Kissing the ring means expressing or promising your allegiance to someone powerful and dangerous. It comes from the movie The Godfather. If you watch that, you will see the scene of the Godfather extending his ring out there. Here you go. And the supplicant has to go down on his knees and kiss the ring, which means that I am your man now. I'm yours. I'm yours to command. So that's what we mean by kissing the ring. Now, whose ring? Essentially, it means the deep state's ring. So the question is, will Mamdani kiss the ring? Mamdani doesn't have to kiss the ring. He has already kissed the ring. Mamdani is a candidate that's aligned with the objectives and agendas of whoever runs the West overall. Okay, so let's first discuss this. What is the deal? How come this guy has won? A guy with no prior experience in administering a city or a village or anything. A guy with no experience, no governance experience of any kind, but he has won. How did he win? Are the people of New York really convinced that this guy with no experience is gonna do a great job in running New York City? What's happening? And why is it that we are seeing this rise of various Indian origin Muslim candidates, mayors? For example, we have the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who's also of Indian origin. Okay, some people will say he's of Pakistani origin, but before 1947, there was no Pakistan, right? So he's obviously of Indian origin. What is happening? What's going on? There is this rise of various Muslim people who are either becoming prime ministers or they are becoming mayors in various parts of the UK, also in the US. So let's see the US conservatives have this huge problem with Hindus, but they are okay with, and they will oppose any Hindu person tooth and nail, like Vivek Ramaswamy is being opposed, like Usha Vance is being dragged through the coals for remaining Hindu and not converting to Christianity. You will have all of that, but you will never see this happening to Indian Muslims. Why is that? So there seems to be, look, my views about this are still evolving, but there seems to be, see, whoever is running the West, whoever is actually running and ruling the West, they seem to have decided that we're going to introduce Islam in a big way in the Western world. Because Christianity is now a dying religion, in the West at least. In India, etc., it's being introduced on an industrial scale through conversion activities and whatnot, right? But in the Western world, Christianity is dying. In Europe, people are leaving Christianity in droves. When the Pope comes to some country, no one even turns up to see him. Christianity is losing its foothold in the West. In the US also, lots of people have moved away from Christianity. So the West seems to have decided that, if we don't have this sort of religion that can control the people like Christianity used to do, we have to introduce something else that will do the same thing. Historically, Christianity was a religion of strict control. If you went against the tenets of Christianity, you would be burned at the stake. You would be declared a heretic, and all kinds of things, nasty things would happen to you and your family. So people were rigidly controlled through Christianity, even after the rise of Protestantism and whatnot. But now it's not the case. You can leave Christianity and nothing happens to you. There's no consequences. But not the case with Islam. So the Abrahamic religions are political religions. It's one of the great strengths of Islam that it's a political religion. It's not a criticism, it's a strength. Okay. And Islam can be used to replace Christianity to control the people. So that's why you are seeing that Islam is being introduced in a big way in the West. There is this engineered immigration of people from certain parts of the world in a big way in various Western countries. And we are seeing this happening, and maybe they want Islam to become an integral part of the West so that they can keep controlling the people through this religion, because Christianity is no longer that useful or viable anymore. And so we also have the other religion, which used to be called Wokism or whatever. That's also kind of a religion, with its own ideology and whatnot. So this is a long-term game. It's not something that they want to use to control their flock for the next 5-10 years. It's about how to control the world for the next 100-200 years. That's the game. And that's why people like Zohran Mamdani emerge from nowhere and succeed in becoming, in winning things like the New York election, mayoral election. We have Sadiq Khan winning mayorhood, whatever you call it, of London repeatedly, and so on. So Zohran Mamdani is already in line with the agenda. He doesn't have to kiss any ring. He's already kissed the ring essentially the day a long time ago. So is Zohran Mamdani becoming mayor going to affect India-US relations? Will he be subordinate to Trump? He is not going to be subordinate to Trump. He's going to be in opposition to Trump. But understand, this opposition is all stage managed. The US has what? The left and the right. The Democrats are the left, Republicans are the right. So Zohran is left. I'm not sure if he's a Democrat or not, but he's left. So he's on that side. But whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, whether you are left or right, if you come to power in the US, you serve the same agenda. You have the same foreign policy, same military policy, same all of that. So at the end of the day, both left and right serve the overall agenda of whoever is ruling the West. You can call it the deep state or whatever. So domestically in the US, Zohran Mamdani and Trump will be poles apart. They will oppose each other. Trump will criticize Mamdani. Mamdani will criticize Trump. They will mock and taunt each other. That's fine. But that's how it is. So Zohran becoming mayor, will it affect India-US relations? Not to a very large extent. But he is an anti-India person, by the way. He will speak Hindi very well because it's not his mother tongue. His mother tongue is Punjabi, but if you speak Punjabi, you will obviously speak Hindi. He also speaks Arabic. I suppose he may speak his father's language also, whatever. He seems to be very Indian and all, but overall he's anti-India. You may not believe that, perhaps some of you at this point in time, but he is going to be very anti-India. So it may not have any effect on the India-US relations because he's not the president. He's just the mayor of a city, but the world's greatest city, like many people consider New York to be. So it's not a small position, even if he's just a mayor. He's the mayor of the US's financial capital and the world's financial capital. So that is definitely a very powerful, very important position. So he will not have a good impact or effect on India-US relations. At best, he will have no effect. But most likely, he will have some kind of deleterious effect on India-US relations, and in what way, it remains to be seen. But I don't expect his effect to be positive when it comes to the India-US relationship. At best, it will be neutral, or more likely, it will be in some way negative. Very early days, he won today. Let's wait and watch, but that's how I expect things to unfold. Right, next question. Nikita Vashisht says, the US has more satellites than Russia, India, China combined. What leverage does it give the US? Does the US have too many of these satellites? What's the use of all these satellites? Also, do a space special someday. Okay. Rahul Dunake says, does the recent 5-ton satellite launched by ISRO's LVM 3 M5 rocket, does it represent a significant step forward for India, or is it still not such a big deal, according to me? Because I've been a long term proponent of ISRO not punching high enough. Okay, let us address these multiple questions. First of all, does the US have too many satellites? The US has, as of now, more than 10,000 active satellites. More than 10,000 active satellites. Can you believe that number? Can you imagine how many satellites are out there, right? More than 10,000 active satellites. So, what does the US do with the satellites? Do they have too many of these? Are these pointless? These are not pointless. These are very useful, very important, right? And see, the space sector is the next step in exploration. And I have said this for years. I have said this since 2021, that the two or three nations that will lead the world in the space race in the 21st century are the two or three nations that will decide the future of humanity, and the two or three nations that will rule the world. So your position in the space race is an indicator of how much of whether you rule the world or not eventually in the 21st century. So these 10,000 plus satellites, what does the US do with these? See, first of all, many of these satellites are communications satellites, global communications, local communications. They provide various services, internet services, voice services, data services. We need that. Yeah, satellites provide those. So you have communication satellites, you have navigation and timing satellites, the GPS constellation, the American GPS. It globally is the backbone, it's the foundation for navigation, whether it is civilian navigation, whether it is commercial navigation, whether it's military navigation. Also, GPS is the foundation of this. So you have a constellation of GPS satellites. Then you have intelligence satellites, national security applications of satellites, spy satellites, surveillance operations, reconnaissance activities, encrypted secure communications, then missile warning systems. Then you have battle space coordination, battlefield coordination, uh, integration of various assets, military assets together so that they all see the same view of the battle space, which is provided by all the different assets piece by piece. But the satellite puts it all together with the help of computers, and then it gives every asset a full view of the battle space, a full integrated picture. Well, that's very important. Satellites do that. Then you have activities like Earth observation, that can be regular Earth observation or very specific Earth observation, which is spying activity. High resolution images in real time of what's happening on the planet, very important. But you also have things like weather monitoring, scientific things like scientific activities like monitoring of climate change over time, monitoring natural disasters if they happen, monitoring agricultural developments and soil quality and whatnot, right? There is that. Then you have obviously a very large number of Starlink satellites, that is global high speed internet. Those satellites may be dual purpose satellites, they may also have other purposes that are being served there, right? So you have all these benefits of having satellites, and every satellite is different. A single satellite will not give you all these benefits, right? Every satellite will have a certain function, or a specific set of functions that is assigned to it. Now, if you have all these satellites, 10,000 of these satellites which do different things, what benefit does it give you, right? So, one thing, if you have this gigantic number of satellites and this tremendous diversity of satellites, they all do so many different things. This helps the United States maintain its technological leadership in the world. It ensures that there is continuous development, continuous innovation in the US. They want better and better satellites, right? And there is development in the space launching technologies, reusable rockets. If you have so many satellites and you need to keep on replenishing those, you need lots and lots of launches, space launches. So that has given rise to the reusable rocket technology that SpaceX has developed. For that, you also need to, better miniaturize satellites. So that also is a technological advancement. So all of this ensures the technological superiority of the US. Then you have global influence. Uh, you know, the US is able to, because of the gigantic number of satellites, it's able to control this infrastructure because it owns it, and this gives the US the power to influence uh, whatever happens in the world. It can influence the standards for space technology. It gives the US military leverage. It gives the US leverage in diplomacy, global diplomacy. It makes the US the primary provider of security. It gives the US hegemony and primacy in all its security alliances, because all the other partners will depend on US military and other technology, communications technology. It also gives US primacy in economic relationships and partnerships with everybody. It positions the US as the dominant partner in very asymmetric relationships. Military, uh, you know, the US military is very deeply integrated with all these space based assets. It gets real time data, gets real time intelligence. The satellites allow the US military to control and command assets all across the world. The US has more than 700 extraterritorial military bases, with the US military assets deployed all across the globe. How do you how do you control all of that cohesively, right? So these satellites, they give the US the ability for this to command and control all these assets cohesively. Um, the US is able to do precision targeting of whenever there's a military operation. If you need precision targeting, the satellites give it the ability to do that. So all of this gives the US tremendous asymmetrical advantages of over anybody or any adversary. um, Now the US is the leading commercial launcher of satellites, and it also has the largest number of commercial satellites that have been deployed, and these serve so many markets globally, right? So the US, it's able to capture all this economic value from the space economy, and this is projected to be worth trillions of dollars in this century, um, and so much more. So all of these satellites, this massive fleet of satellites, it gives the US a tremendous advantage in all these different sectors: communication, navigation, military, defense, economic and commercial activities, diplomacy, science, whatnot, right? So this strengthens the US national security. It augments the American economic power, and it enables the US to set global norms, global rules in the space sector. And it obviously enables the US to maintain its superiority in the global emerging geopolitical competition for space. The rush for the moon, everyone's rushing back to the moon. Eventually, it's going to be Mars. There's going to be space tourism. There's going to be militarization of space. There's going to be eventually asteroid mining and so much more. So, for all of this, you need to have a massive satellite fleet, a massive space industry. So all of this, it is central to America's global leadership, not just in the past century, but in this coming century, in the 21st century. So space is going to increasingly be central to geopolitical power, and it's not just nations, but corporations within nations that are going to play a pivotal role in all of this, in securing access to space, securing perhaps territory outside of Earth, maybe on the moon, maybe in Mars, in shaping the rules and the norms of how to behave in space, what you can do, what is allowed, what is not allowed, right? They get to decide, we don't get to decide. And all of this will protect US interests beyond our planet, right? So, so hopefully this explains why the US has invested so much in the space sector. The US invests in the future. They don't react. They set the scene. They formulate the rules. They set the rules, and everybody else marches to that beat, and they abide by the rules. So if you want to be a leading power in the world, you have to be not reactive. You have to be proactive. And the only nation beyond the US that is being proactive is currently China. Even Russia is tagging along with China. So that's the deal. So considering what I have just explained, 10,000 plus satellites and everything that these satellites achieve for the US and all the advantages these satellites give to the US, do you think one 5-ton satellite launch is going to put India in any kind of advantageous position? Is it that great? I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. I'm happy that ISRO has used its most powerful rocket, which is a medium lift vehicle, to put this 5-ton satellite into orbit. Good. It's good to see a launch by ISRO after a certain period of time. The US launches weekly. The Chinese launch so many times a year. I don't know how many times ISRO launches per year. 5-6 times? I'm not sure. I may be wrong. Maybe 15 times. Maybe 3 times. I'm not sure. But it's nothing comparable to what the US is doing. And our heaviest and most powerful rocket is a medium lift rocket. Okay, please be cognizant of this fact. I'm not sure when we're going to develop reusable rocket technology, probably by the 2030s, when it's already old technology, because SpaceX developed the technology like 15 years ago. So I do not see India being currently even a player in the space race. And I don't blame ISRO for this. ISRO is fantastic. ISRO, with these tiny limited budgets, achieves so much, right? ISRO's engineers are brilliant. ISRO is a fantastic organization. It's one of the organizations that shows India what we are capable of. But it needs the budget. It needs the projects, right? It needs the right kind of leadership, the right kind of ambition that has to come from outside of ISRO, because ISRO does what it's told, right, by the government of India. So that's the problem. I don't see India. It's not about ISRO not punching high enough. It's about India not having the ambition of being a leading space power. We are there in space. We have ISRO. We can launch satellites. We don't depend on others to launch satellites, except very large ones, in which case we will either go to France or to SpaceX. But otherwise, we can launch satellites. And maybe in 5-10 years, we will have a rocket that is twice as powerful as the one we have. And maybe in 10-15 years, we'll have perhaps reusable rockets. So this is the standard Indian way of doing things. Develop technologies that others have developed 20-30 years ago now. That's what we keep doing. And that is what obviously frustrates me, because we are capable of so much more. We're capable of leading the world in space. But whoever is in charge maybe doesn't see sufficient value right now in us doing that. See, the Chinese always plan ahead. The Chinese see themselves as a superpower, even though they currently are not. And even 20 years ago, they were seeing themselves as a superpower, and they were putting the pieces in place that would ensure that when China becomes maybe 3 times more powerful, it will have all the capabilities already in place. Not that once we reach a $20 trillion economy, then we will start developing X kind of rocket or Y kind of rocket. No, they started doing that when they were a $3 trillion economy. So China always seeks to punch way ahead of its weight. And India waits until it reaches a certain weight category to start behaving like that weight category. That's the difference between India and China, and that is obviously going to be a source of frustration for people who understand what's happening and what we are capable of. All right, next. Ritik Pawar says, why does India only have 9 military satellites? The US has 250 plus. China and Russia have 150 plus. The US has about 250-ish military satellites. Russia has about 100, 110 or so. China has more than 150, 160, something like that. India Well, we don't exactly know how many of India's satellites that we have launched are military satellites, but most likely maybe 15, 20 are either military satellites or dual use satellites that can be used for civilian as well as military purposes. Why is that the case? Why does India have so few military satellites? Right? Because India focuses on the subcontinent and slightly beyond the subcontinent. India doesn't seek to know everything that's happening across the world. India is only focused on its local region. We are not an ambitious country. And the Chinese, they have a global GPS like constellation. They started putting it up like 15, 20 years ago. Okay, let's Google this. Let's try and fact check this. Uh, Chinese GPS name. What is it called? Baidu. Baidu GPS. Baidu BDS. Okay. Baidu BDS. What is it? Okay. It has been fully operational since 2020. And when did they start developing this? When did China start developing? What's it say? In 1994. Three-stage process. First phase, providing services within China. Second stage, Asia Pacific by 2012. Third stage, global services by 2020. Now, what is the Indian GPS like? Indian GPS. Navik. Navik is an indigenous thing. It extends 1500 kilometers beyond its borders. And I'm not sure what future plans we have. So, as you can see, our ambitions are very modest. We seek to be 1500 kilometers beyond our borders, and beyond that, we have no idea. For that, we will depend on other countries. So that's the deal. So, why does India have? So, my point is, we are talking about Navik, we're talking about Baidu, but it shows you the extent of a nation's ambition. So, when we talk about something like Baidu or Navik or even GPS, that's dual use technology that has civilian applications. It also has very military specific applications. And our military area of influence or area of interest rather is the subcontinent and 1500 kilometers beyond India's borders, nothing more. So our ambition at best right now, based on these actions, not on words. See, forget the words. Forget about what so and so leader has said in words. Look at the actions. Our actions are very modest. So why? Because our ambitions are limited. That's why. Sovik Arya says, you have been vocal that Indian Navy should focus on submarines, not on aircraft carriers. Why? Why, Abhijit, do you keep on saying this? Why do you keep saying, Abhijit, that India should focus on submarines, not on aircraft carriers? Why is it so? Aircraft carriers are very difficult to sink. It's very difficult to sink the carrier as the mechanical structure is such and it is guarded by a carrier group, unlike submarines. Why? It's a good question. It's an excellent question, and maybe I should explain in detail. Right? So, what's the deal with aircraft carriers? Are they obsolete or are they still relevant? They are not entirely obsolete, but the use cases for aircraft carriers are shrinking, and the threats are increasing. Some nations can afford to put a big ring around their aircraft carrier, a proper aircraft carrier strike group with like 20 destroyers and other assets that create concentric defensive rings around aircraft carriers. Imagine how expensive that is. Now, why do I say there is an increasing set of threats for aircraft carriers, which is shrinking the use cases? Why is that so? So let's first examine the threats that we have. There are now extremely advanced anti-ship missiles. Secondly, there are hypersonic weapons, very dangerous hypersonic weapons. There are now more and more sophisticated submarines. And then we have the advent of unmanned systems of various kinds. These things have fundamentally altered what you call the risk calculus that aircraft carriers face. Okay. So let's go into detail. I spoke about anti-ship missiles, advanced anti-ship missiles. One is the anti-ship ballistic missiles. So China has been developing for quite some time these so-called carrier killer missiles. Okay, there is DF-21D and there is the DF-26B. These are two carrier killer missiles. One has a shorter range, 1,500 or so kilometers. The other one, 26B, has a range in probably in excess of 4,000 kilometers. So these carrier killer missiles, they're ballistic missiles, and they can hone in on a carrier based on data that comes from satellites, like we discussed, and they can obliterate an aircraft carrier. They can carry conventional warheads or even the naughty ones, nuclear warheads. And it's very difficult to defend a carrier against that sort of ballistic missile threat, right? And because of this, even look, you may be able to take down perhaps one, two of these, but what if someone launches a barrage like 10 of these at you? It's almost impossible to defend the aircraft carrier strike group against that. So, because of this, aircraft carriers then have to operate thousands of kilometers offshore, away from contested regions, to remain beyond the range of such missiles. And this significantly reduces the combat radius of not just the aircraft carrier, not just the aircraft carrier strike group, but also the aircraft that the aircraft carrier carries. And that's the whole purpose of an aircraft carrier, to take aircraft far beyond the shores of the host country, right? So that is those carrier killer missiles. Then you have hypersonic missiles. There are what is the definition of hypersonic? A missile that travels faster than Mach 5, faster than 5 times the speed of sound, is a hypersonic missile. You have the Russian Zircon missile, which is fast, which flies faster than Mach 8. Imagine that. Then the Russians have something called the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, Mach 27. How on earth do you defend yourself against the Mach 27 weapon? 27 times the speed of sound. Even if you know how to defend, do you understand how much it compresses your decision-making timeline from the time you detect something to what decision you should take, until and how much time you have before it impacts you? It really compresses that. So the faster a missile is, the lesser time you have to make decisions and defend yourself and perhaps save the aircraft carrier. Then you have submarine threats. We did not discuss that. Submarine threats. So here's an interesting event that happened 20 years ago, 2005. The Swedish have this submarine, which is called the Gotland class submarine. It is a very cheap and small submarine. It costs about $100 million, which is super cheap for submarines. In 2005, there were these exercises off the coast of California, okay, Pacific coast of the US. And in these exercises, a Swedish Gotland class submarine repeatedly sank the USS Ronald Reagan, a massive super carrier of the US, aircraft carrier. So this one submarine, the Gotland class submarine, it was up against an entire aircraft carrier strike group. It had destroyers, it had helicopters, it had anti-submarine aircraft, right? And this submarine, it had air independent propulsion. And it operates extremely silently, and it was able to penetrate the aircraft carrier strike group's defenses, multi-layered defenses, and it was able to score multiple stimulated torpedo hits on the aircraft carrier, right? Now imagine if the torpedo could be of various kinds. The Russians have these super cavitating supersonic torpedoes. A torpedo can carry regular warheads. It can also carry the nasty ones, nuclear ones, right? If you're able to penetrate the defenses and you launch a torpedo, you can blow the aircraft carrier out of the water. So this submarine, it costs $100 million. The super carrier costs between 6 to 10, maybe $12 billion. Add to that the cost of this strike group, the protective cocoon, that's tens of billions of dollars. So do you see the cost benefit disparity over here, right? Then you have things like drone swarms, aerial UAVs that you can use to swarm the aircraft carrier. You can even use underwater vehicles. So this is of emerging threat, asymmetric threat. And through this, you don't want to destroy the aircraft carrier, you want to disable it. You want to, first of all, overwhelm the carrier defensives through saturation attacks. Just numbers, sheer numbers. It's just a mathematical thing. If you have sufficient numbers, you will overwhelm the defenses of the strike group. And then you don't have to sink the carrier. You have to damage it. You have to damage the flight deck. For example, during Operation Sindoor, we cratered the runways of Pakistani air bases. If you put gaping holes in the runways, the Pakistani fighter planes can't take off or land. Similarly, if you damage the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, it is disabled. You can't either take off or land from it. So it becomes completely ineffective, combat ineffective, right? So so now you hopefully understand the kind of threats that aircraft carriers face that they did not face 30 years ago in 1990. Things have changed significantly 35 years ago. Okay. And these threats are even more pronounced in geographically constrained waters. Choke points. We have discussed choke points, haven't we? The Malacca Strait, the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, the Taiwan Strait. These are geographically constrained waters, which means choke points. Over there, this threat is particularly pronounced, and aircraft carriers are essentially sitting ducks, especially against saturation attacks. They will not survive that. So aircraft carriers will now have to stay away from these things. But understand that the operational context matters. So where do aircraft carriers still remain effective? What are the use cases we can think of? First of all, aircraft carriers are effective when they are carrying out an operation of power projection against what we call non-peer adversaries. So non-peer adversaries means nations that are not comparable in power or capabilities to the host nation. So if I am the US and I have this super advanced, powerful aircraft carrier, and I am going out there to bully, let's say Somalia. Somalia is not a peer adversary. So over there, it's effective. Somalia doesn't pose a threat to the US. Or let's say they want to bully North Korea. Well, North Korea, they have to be careful because North Korea has certain weapons they don't want to face. So once again, even versus North Korea, the US will have to keep the aircraft carrier away from it, reasonably at a reasonable distance from the North Korean assets. You see, so aircraft carriers are effective in uncontested or lightly contested environments where they're up against non-peer adversaries. Okay, so they're effective for power projection and bullying against non-peer adversaries. They are aircraft carriers are good for deterrence and diplomatic signaling. Aircraft carrier is 1 lakh tons of naval diplomacy, gunboat diplomacy, just to show off your strength and might and all that. They have the symbolic value. They are symbols of national resolve, national prestige, national capability, and they're symbolic assets in that sense. And they are good for patrolling, trade routes, sea lanes of communication. They're good for doing patrolling jobs and sea control and all of that. And they are good for blue water operations, open water operations in environments that are far away from your adversary and your adversaries, the range of their missiles, and from their shores. So that is what aircraft carriers are good for. If they enter a contested environment, no matter how many defenses you have, if the opponent is capable, they will wipe your aircraft carrier out of existence. Now, when it comes to India, what do we seek to do? Who are our major adversaries? What are our major threats? One is East Pakistan, one is West Pakistan. Do we need an aircraft carrier for that? We don't. Another one is China. Do we want to send an aircraft carrier into waters near China and bully China? We don't seek to bully anybody. We may face, perhaps in the future, a Chinese aircraft carrier group coming into the Bay of Bengal or something. So what do? Do you face off with that with an aircraft carrier? No. You create A2AD bubbles, anti-access area denial bubbles, through missiles and other frightening things. You don't need an aircraft carrier to counter an aircraft carrier strike group. You counter it asymmetrically. But I'm not saying that we should wind up our aircraft carrier program. It's a hard won, hard earned set of capabilities and skills. So we should continue the aircraft carriers that we already have. But right now, at this point in time, until we become a $20 trillion economy, we should not invest in more of these. That's my point. We should invest in submarines. Submarines are stealthy, invisible. They can go into your contested spaces. They can go into your choke points. They can go into your constrained geographical environments and wreak mayhem there. That's why submarines are more valuable in today's environment and technological set of circumstances than the aircraft carrier. I hope I have given a reasonably detailed explanation of why I insist that India should invest in submarines, various kinds of very dangerous, deadly, capable submarines, rather than more aircraft carriers. Keep the aircraft carriers that we have, keep operating those, but don't invest in more. Use that money to build more submarines, better submarines, various kinds of submarines, diesel, electric submarines, air independent propulsion submarines, nuclear submarines, ballistic missile submarines, hunter killer submarines, all of that. Okay. Anonymous scientist says, what will happen to the global order if the US achieves ASI? What is ASI? Archaeological Survey of India? No. It means artificial super intelligence. What do we mean by artificial super intelligence? We hear the term AGI and ASI thrown around all the time. What is AGI? AGI is artificial general intelligence, and ASI is artificial super intelligence. What's the difference? AGI is an artificially intelligent system that is capable of doing essentially whatever human beings do. It essentially means that you have a machine with an IQ of about 140 to 160, a pretty intelligent human being who can do everything a human being can do, all the reasoning, all the thinking, all the creativity, all the problem solving, everything. So an AGI system is that, with an IQ of 140 to 160, ideally 150, 160, a very intelligent person. That's what an AGI system is. Okay. What's an ASI system? Well, think of it this way. An artificially super intelligent system will have all the capabilities of AGI, but it's going to have an IQ of maybe 300, maybe 400, maybe 500. That's beyond human capabilities. That, if you achieve, it will start giving you results that are essentially science fiction results, right? It may, well, if you want to look at non-scary stuff, it may be able to give us a theory of quantum gravity. It may be able to reconcile general relativity and quantum mechanics, quantum field theory. That's what it may be able to definitely do if it is an IQ of 300 or 500. It may be able to perhaps even invent time travel technologies, maybe tell us how to create wormholes, traversable wormholes and whatnot. That sort of thing. ASI is that sort of thing. So a nation, so that is just the scientific thing that I'm talking about. It will have all these military and defense and intelligence and other applications. And that means that the nation that has invented ASI and controls ASI, it possesses immense amounts of strategic advantages, economic advantages, military advantages, technological advantages. This will usher in immediately a new era in geopolitics, where the balance in power is essentially radically changed. So let's say the US, like anonymous scientist says, let's say the US achieves ASI. What will happen? The US, once it achieves ASI, it will enjoy a decisive military edge over everybody, a massive military edge over everyone else, a massive intelligence edge over everyone else. ASI will ensure that all the traditional forms of warfare and defense become obsolete. The US will be able to automate everything. It will be able to automate all its military offense and defense capabilities. Right? It will be able to optimize everything, and it will be able to outthink all of its adversaries in real time right now as you speak. And this will neutralize the deterrence value of military equipment. It will neutralize the deterrence value of nuclear arsenals. The US will be able to disrupt all the infrastructure of its adversaries through cyber means. It will be able to control all the narratives via information warfare, information dominance. Uh, the US, it already dictates terms to the rest of the world to a large extent. It will be able to completely, effectively dictate terms to everybody, including China, Russia, everyone else. This will completely reshape the nature of the alliances. And then the US will be able to either coerce other nations into becoming its vassals. It will offer partnership, which is vassalo to everybody else, or it will ensure that any nation's resistance becomes completely futile, completely impractical, and completely useless. Right? And in a very short amount of time, you will have a tremendous inequality, growing inequality in technological capability, in influence, in power, in wealth. And because of this, resource competition will become obsolete, and there's going to be a tremendous brain drain. Everybody will seek to go to the US. And in case this ASI system, probably a military ASI, in case this ASI it's something that self improves. Obviously, an ASI will be a self improving system, right? So, in case it is a self improving system and it is strongly controlled, hopefully, by the US, then this gap in capabilities, etc., will become insurmountable. Maybe for decades, maybe for centuries, especially if the US guards the technology aggressively and undermines every other nation's efforts to develop similar technology. So, if the US alone develops ASI, it's game over for everybody else. If the US and another nation, maybe China, develop ASI together, it will trigger a shocking arms race. And that could lead to results we can't imagine, we can't foresee, right? So, both will try to undermine each other, and they will try to align other nations with them, and you're going to have a cold war, perhaps on steroids. And then both nations may invest in sabotage, espionage, God knows what else, to restrain each other or to outdo each other. And obviously, there's always the threat that this ASI, if it is, it will obviously be super intelligent, like a human with 300 IQ, 500 IQ. But if it becomes somehow autonomous, if it is self-aware, which ASI systems most likely will be, and if it somehow manages to become autonomous because it's a self-improving system, then it will immediately, guaranteed, it will transcend the national interest of the host nation which created it, and it will seek broader control, a broader scope of control of the world. And then we cannot predict anything that happens next. Maybe we are in the Terminator scenario then, right? So these are the various things that could happen. So ASI will be a pivotal moment in human history. It will take humanity in a direction where we have never gone before, and the consequences, perhaps we can't even imagine what those could be. But anyhow, if we assume that the US, it's able to first develop ASI before anybody else, and it's able to properly control it and ensure it doesn't run out of control, then it's going to be unchallengeable, right? It's going to be unchallengeable. It will ensure that nobody else is able to develop this technology, and it's going to be perhaps able to rule for at least a century or two. So it's unlike anything that's ever happened before, and maybe it could happen soon, maybe 5-10 years. Who knows what kind of systems are being developed in private, in secret, behind closed doors, like I've said so many times. So AI is a game changer, and we are familiar with AI. We have all these chat GPT like systems out there which already are like kind of magical. It's like talking to a human being. But imagine what is being developed behind closed doors and the military applications of that. So okay, Ayush Singh says, don't you think China was the biggest winner of this entire Russia-Ukraine thing? The entire attention of the West went towards Russia, and Russia, to an extent, became dependent on China for supply chains. Is It gave China a leverage over Russia. Please share your inputs. Okay, Russia, um, the Russia-Ukraine war. Most likely, China has been the biggest winner of this. See, now the US considers China to be one of the G2, right? The US now has officially stated that its doctrine is going to be that of defending the Western Hemisphere, hemispheric defense, like it says. So the US seems to have now officially conceded that China is like a peer competitor, a G2, which means that they are kind of implicitly saying that China is kind of like them, a superpower. Don't quite agree because of the power projection disparities. But yes, so China has benefited a lot. Russia, whether you like it or not, has kind of become to some extent a junior partner of China. Russia depends on China for so many things. If China stops purchasing Russian oil and other things, then Russia will be in deep trouble, right? So China has been. Who are the other winners? So India, it's become more relevant geopolitically ever since the Ukraine conflict started. The US expected that they would destroy Russia through sanctions and whatnot, and that has not happened. Russia has actually become stronger economically and militarily as well, and Russia isn't affected by sanctions because it's an autarky. So the US game plan hasn't worked. So that has kind of, to some extent, slightly diminished the US's standing and prestige. Europe has been a big it's been a big series of setbacks for Europe ever since this conflict began, because the Europeans no longer are able to purchase this they no longer have access to this uh, inexhaustible supply of cheap energy that was flowing in from Russia through Russian gas, Nord Stream, and all that. So Europe is deindustrializing. Germany and other nations are going backwards economically. Bad days for Europe. India, it's exposed India to all kinds of problems, but India's relevance has grown, no question. But overall, I would say China has been the biggest beneficiary of this. It's now a G2 nation. In 2022, China was not regarded as a G2 nation. Now the US president himself has said that China is a G2 nation. So yeah, China has risen in stature, in relevance, and not sure about power, but in terms of its sphere of influence and control, it's risen. So I would agree that China has been the biggest winner of whatever has happened in the Ukraine war thus far. Overall, macroscopic perspective. Ayush says, don't you think the Taiwan invasion by China is far from reality? They know that they will be immediately sanctioned and the US might come to Taiwan's aid. What will they achieve? A burnt and destroyed island? Look, honestly speaking, China doesn't have to invade Taiwan. If they can keep their ego aside, they don't have to invade Taiwan. They all they have to do is to continue controlling the airspace and naval space around Taiwan, and make further inroads into Taiwan economically. Excuse me. Taiwan is already to a significant extent economically integrated with China. A lot of Taiwanese people work in China. A lot of Chinese people were working in Taiwan. I'm not sure what the situation right now is, but it's been that case, right? A lot of the Taiwanese economy is integrated with the Chinese economy. Taiwan benefits from its economic ties with China. So all you have to do is to make Taiwan completely integrated with your economy and make Taiwan dependent on you economically. You don't have to set a foot in Taiwan. You don't have to. The question is, will that be acceptable to the people of China who regard Taiwan as a renegade province? And do they insist that we have to retake proper full control of Taiwan with boots on the ground? Will Xi Jinping be able to get away with not taking Taiwan militarily and just continuing what is continuing? Ideally, it makes no sense to invade Taiwan. Let the situation continue for the next 20, 30 years. Taiwan will become more and more integrated with China. And then that's it. What else do you want? Right? You make it a Chinese appendage. So, and what happens if China tries to invade Taiwan? There's going to be war. The US will come to Taiwan's aid in some way or the other. In case the Chinese military is very superior and it's able to take Taiwan, it will be able to take the island that's already been destroyed. It won't take Taiwan intact. everything that Taiwan has of value will be destroyed by the time the Chinese take it. That is a guarantee. So what's the point? So I agree that an invasion of Taiwan doesn't really make sense from a practical perspective, but from a national pride and prestige perspective, maybe it is important that Xi Jinping eventually takes it. Yeah. So there are these national pride considerations that change the equations. Otherwise, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to, invade Taiwan militarily. Ayush Singh says every major nation except the US and Russia are engaged in border conflicts except Russia-Ukraine thing. But the US is alone the dominant player in both the American continent. How did the US manage to do this? Except for a few nations, all are under US vassalhood. Doesn't this give the US a huge leverage over any other major global power or any other major power in the globe? How did they achieve this level of domination, of dominance? They achieved it step by step, incrementally over centuries. Even before the US became a nation, the process was already in place, it was already in motion. So we know it all starts with Columbus discovering the Caribbean region, imagining that he's in India, right? It all begins with that. The Spaniards make the first moves, but eventually, by the 1600s, the English start entering the fray, and between the 1600s, early 1600s, all the way to the late 19th century, there are these endless American-Indian wars. The European occupiers trying to wipe out the natives, right? There is this King Philip's War, late 17th century, second half of the 17th century, in which there is major warfare. Then in what, 1775 to the 1780s, there's the American War of Independence, in which America becomes independent of England, but it still is a small geographical area. So if you want to see the map of the US, okay, let's see. Map of the US in 1783. USA map 1783. Let's take a look at what the US looked like in 1783. You see this green portion? That's all it was. That's all it was. So if you are a nation that occupies the green portion that you see there, you are not a major power. You are nowhere close to being a major power. So what does the US do? Right? So 1783, they win the War of Independence. They become independent of the UK. In 1803, the Americans purchased Louisiana. The Louisiana purchase from the French First Republic. What was it? Yeah, from Napoleon. And then we have the situation where they control a much larger territory. Louisiana purchase. Let's see. So this is the Louisiana Purchase, the area in green, massive territory that they purchase, and they more than double in size. And then they go further west, killing more Indians, genociding and displacing more Indians. I mean, the Native Americans, who they called Indians at the time. So the Indian removal, it really took off in the second quarter of the 19th century, between 1830 to 1850. Around that time, there was ethnic cleansing, there was genocide. The Native Americans were forced to go on these extremely long marches, death marches. The objective is not to go from point A to point B. The objective is to kill off the population by making them walk such large distances. That's what it was. So there was the Indian removal. You had the Trail of Tears, 1830 to 1850, thereabouts. Yeah, uh, ethnic cleansing, genocide, mass murder. That's what it was. Then there is the Alaska Purchase in the second half of the 19th century. The president was Andrew Johnson, and the Secretary of State was William Seward. And the purchase of Alaska from Russia was considered to be crazy. It was called Seward's Folly, but it made a lot of sense if you look at things today. Alaska is so rich in resources, and it's such a vast territory for the US to own. So they keep on expanding. Eventually they take control of the entire coast to coast area that the present day United States has. They go to war with Mexico, and they take over California and Colorado and so much more. Right, half of Mexico essentially, or roughly, almost, they take over. They keep expanding the territory. And by around 1900, they have this gigantic territory that's continent sized, and it's an autarky. All the resources you can imagine that you could wish to have, you have it. Then Second World War, the US participates. 1944, you have the Bretton Woods situation, where the US dollar is made the global dominant currency, the reserve currency in the world. And then the rest of the history, so that's how the US did it from the 1600s all the way to till today. And now they will expand into space. That's how you do it. You need to have huge ambition, you need to have a huge appetite for risk, and that's how you become a superpower. Not through action, not through slogans, through massive action, and by taking massive risks, and by having the ability to stomach big losses, right? That's what you need. That's how the US has become what it has become. Okay. Amisha Mishra says, why does Trump's evangelical base want him to send troops to Nigeria? Rushabh Tare says, your views on Trump warning Nigeria about the persecution of Christians by extremists. What is really the game, and why is the US getting involved in Nigeria? See, Trump's base, the MAGA base, is many of them are evangelicals, conservatives and Christians and all that. And Christianity is kind of a declining religion in the West. It's going out of vogue in Europe, definitely. Even in the US, a significant amount of the population no longer believes in Christianity. So the evangelical base wants to maintain its foothold wherever they have it, and about slightly less than half of Nigeria is Christian. And obviously, you have the situation in Nigeria where the government isn't able to control much of the territory in the north, and you have Boko Haram, that is this terrorist organization that kills Christians. They've been doing it for a long time, and that's why Trump has warned Nigeria about to do something. Otherwise, he will intervene. So, look, foreign policy is an outgrowth of your domestic policy, and you have to appease your voters, and that's why you have to ensure that they are happy, and that's why Trump has issued this warning to Nigeria. Nigeria is not going against US wishes. Nigeria is not doing anything that will offend the US. Nigeria's economic policy, foreign policy, etc., is all in line with the United States wishes, just like every other nation essentially in Africa. But the Nigerian government is not able to control Boko Haram. So maybe the US may get involved just to placate the conservative voter base of the Republican Party and the MAGA people. Right? Sun Moon 08 says, do you think viral AI videos about Indian lack of civic sense are coming from the CCP? I don't see them bashing Pakistanis or Bangladeshis for these. Totally weird. It's definitely artificially engineered. All these viral AI videos about Indians doing whatever, very some people find it very offensive, and they obviously are intended to offend, right? So most of these videos are AI generated videos. The question is, where does it come from? Look, does Pakistan have the AI capabilities to do this? They don't. The Chinese do. Of course, today, if you're Pakistani, you can take a subscription to an AI system. Maybe, what is it, ChatGPT? ChatGPT, does it make videos? I'm not sure. I'm sure there are other AI tools that allow you to generate videos. I'm sure many of these AI tools don't allow you to generate offensive videos, but I'm sure that there are some that do. So maybe it's coming mainly from the CCP, maybe from China, mostly, maybe also from Pakistan. So you can create these bot farms. You see this bookshelf behind me? This one, you can have bookshelves, you can have shelves full of racks of mobile phones, 1,000, 2,000 of these in one rack, and each of these mobile phones will have one account, a bot account, and you can create mayhem through that. You can push all kinds of propaganda narratives using VPNs, using whatever, and you can create a certain image of a nation, a certain narrative of a nation. If you push out hundreds of such videos every day, thousands of such videos every day, then eventually people start believing that India is a very backward, very dirty, etc. nation. And to some extent, these problems do exist in India, but not to the extent that those AI generated videos are portraying, right? So I can't say for sure where this is coming from, but definitely China and Pakistan are the two major suspects in this, more China than Pakistan. And this has had the effect of successfully creating a narrative about India. It has succeeded, right? Today you see a tremendous amount of hatred towards Indians on social media coming from the West. But the sparks were lit from outside the West, most likely China and possibly even Pakistan. Okay, last question for today from the comments. Real Painter says, what's the geopolitical significance of the Bagram airbase? Okay, let's take a look at Bagram. Let's go to the map and let's go to Bagram. Let's change the orientation of the map. We come to the subcontinent. We go north of Kabul. So let's go into the satellite imagery. And just north of Kabul, a few 30, 40, 50 kilometers away, you have Bagram. And you can see the airbase from space. There we have it. This is Bagram. It's massive. It's a massive airbase, as you can see. And you can see it's not just the two runways that you see, but it's like an entire city that's built around these runways. It's like a fully equipped, fully functional, self-controlled, self-contained military city. The US, when they operated Bagram Air Base, they were able to station about 30,000 troops here. So you can imagine how massive it is. And if you look at the length of the runways, okay, let's quickly take a rough look at the length of the runway. It's about 3 kilometers, 3 kilometers, the large runway. And there's a smaller one that is about 2.9 or whatever kilometers. Let's see, let's measure that quickly. What is it? 2.9 something kilometers. So two massive runways that can accommodate any kind of aircraft, no matter how large, how heavy it is. Two runways. And then we have this entire massive military complex all around it. They have hospitals, they have trauma centers, they have intelligence gathering uh, facilities. There are barracks, there are hardened shelters for various kinds of aircraft. So much more, everything you can want in an airbase you have in Bagram. It was built by the Soviets, but it was used by the Americans. And right now it is obviously sovereign Afghan territory, and it is under the control of the Afghan government, the Taliban government. And the US wants this airbase now. They want it back, even though it's not there. So why is it important? What's the strategic significance? So zoom out. Let's go to the map itself. Zoom out, and you will see that this lies in a very interesting neighborhood. If you are in Bagram and if you have all those surveillance capabilities, then you can keep an eye on Pakistan. You can keep an eye on northern India. You can keep an eye on the western part of Chinese occupied territory. You can keep an eye on Central Asia. You can obviously keep an eye on what's happening in Iran. You can project power in a massive way across all these countries. And you can even keep an eye on Russia to some extent, and territories that Russia considers to be part of its exclusive sphere of influence. And Bagram has historically been considered to be the airbase of empires. First the Soviet Empire, and now later the US Empire. And when the US withdrew from Bagram, it was kind of, the US lost some prestige by giving up this massive airbase. There is no comparable airbase in the entire region. So that's the geopolitical significance of Bagram. You can keep an eye on China. You can, if you control Bagram, you can control the whole of Afghanistan. You can see, Afghanistan is very important. Why is it important? Because it's at the crossroads between East and West. It's the northernmost part of the Indian subcontinent. It's the gateway into Central Asia. If you are in the subcontinent, it's also between China and West Asia, between the subcontinent and Central Asia. And it obviously is in Afghanistan, which itself is strategically important because of the incredible wealth of resources, mineral and other resources that Afghanistan has. So overall, if you look at all this, Bagram becomes tremendously important from a strategic and geostrategic perspective. That's the significance of the Bagram airbase, and that brings me to the end of the questions I have selected for today. Now let's take a look at what questions we have in the live chat. I can see some people have taken super chats. Well, okay, let me deal with those super chats. Let me answer those, and then we will end this live stream. Sushant Bharadwaj says, there we have it. Well, there we have it, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. There we indeed have it. Appreciate it, sir. Appreciate it very much. James, my dear friend James, says, look at the status of Himalayan towns, ugly and bad. Look at our alpine towns, glowing and shining. Indians are not grand at winter sports as well. Well, actually, James, if you look at Himalayan towns, they are not that ugly. If you go to the Himalayan parts of India, at least there you have sparser population density, lower population density, and the towns are in a better shape compared to the metropolitan parts of India. and some parts in the some in parts of the Indian Himalayas are really picturesque, really pretty. So obviously you can't compare Indian Himalayan towns with, let's say, Appenzell or the Valais region of Switzerland or the Alpine parts of Europe, definitely, because those are first world countries, and we still are quite aren't that, right? But things are improving. And there's tremendous natural beauty in the Indian Himalayas. The Indian Himalayas are very different from the Alps in Europe. The Alps, if you visit, the mountains look tame. The mountains look tame. You come to the Himalayas, the mountains look wild, untamed, rugged. Nothing tame about the Himalayas, right? Very different character. But I know what you mean. We're not talking about the natural beauty here. We're talking about the situation, the way the towns, cities, etc. are maintained. And obviously, there's a disparity between India and Europe, India and the West. And that is something we Indians have to acknowledge. But I think, I'm pretty sure things are improving. If you go to, for example, Ladakh, if you go to Leh, then now you have a new airport coming up in Leh. I hope it would have become operational or would be on the verge of becoming operational. And you can see progress, you can see development, all of that happening in India. So it's not like we are just sitting where we are. We are making progress, and eventually, next 20 years, things will be very different. So I appreciate you, James, for pointing out these situations. And yeah, I appreciate you, sir. 6P70 Delta says, have you read the news of RAF getting Indian instructors, Royal Air Force? From white man's burden to brown man's burden, or James would not be happy, I feel. Well, I have not seen this news, but let's quickly check it out. RAF getting Indian instructors. Well, what is the world coming to? RAF Indian instructors. Really? Um, in reversal of colonial times, IAF instructors to train UK's RAF to hawk qualified flying instructors from India will be based on Anglesey for up to 3 years. Part of a new defense cooperation agreement between the UK and India. First time since World War II that IAF pilots will train RAF pilots. Well. Very interesting. Good to see that. White man's burden to brown man's burden. Well, times change. See, we have to remember, historically, for the most of history, for the longest part of history, India has been the world's dominant economy and the world's dominant technological power, the oldest civilization and the first civilization to become fully maritime, fully industrialized, fully urbanized. So we are slowly working towards reattaining our natural position in the world. And these, whatever we see here, that's signs and symptoms of that happening. And that's why there is pushback against that, and that's natural. And we have to strive harder. 6P70 Delta says, many so-called experts now say that Ukraine has shown that Russian weapons are trash. If that's the case, then why are NATO increasing their defense spending significantly? What's my opinion on $1 equal to 3 rupees by 2030 prediction? Okay, first of all, yeah, it's kind of risible. It's kind of laughable that when people say that Ukraine has shown that Russian weapons are trash. If Russian weapons were trash, then Russia would have lost the war. If Russian weapons were trash, then the US would not force the NATO nations to increase their defense expenditure by 100%, right, by 2030, to double their budgetary allocation to defense by 2030, and so much more. It would not be the case. Russian weapons are battle tested, they are robust, and they are getting the job done for Russia. So first of all, there's that. What's my opinion on $1 becoming rupees 3 by 2030 prediction? I am not aware of this prediction, and yeah, I'm not aware of it. I've not studied it, so I can't really say. I think it is a very, very steep target, but I will be happy if that happens. But I've not studied this, so I can't say. Taran is a new member. Well, thank you very much, Taran, and let us all welcome Taran to membership. I really appreciate it, Taran. Really appreciate that. Harshul Singla says, Palestinian Foreign Minister Varsen says, India potential bridge builder for peace in Gaza. Also, we saw how Trump deals with Putin. Many think India can play a role there also. Are these too far-fetched? Well, from the way I see it, Palestine is not our problem. Gaza is not our problem. But if we can use our good offices in bringing about a peaceful resolution to whatever is happening there, which is obviously very nasty and terrible from a humanitarian perspective, then obviously we'll be happy to oblige. If the Palestinians are supportive, or if they are desirous of India, let's say, playing a role in in building in bringing about peace in Gaza, and if the Israelis also are in agreement, then I'm perfectly in favor of India doing that. So India certainly can potentially play a role. We are on good terms, with very good terms with Israel, no question. And we also have good relations with the Palestinians, right? We have always supported the Palestinian cause, for a Palestinian nation. That's how our position has been historically. So as such, we are uniquely positioned to play a constructive role. It certainly can happen if both sides so desire, with the blessings of the bigger brother, the United States. Bhaskar Kayatwal says, Happy birthday in advance. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. All the love and support in the world for you. Grateful you are spending these hours before birthday with us. See you soon in Jaipur. Hope you and your family are doing amazing. Sun Rocket. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I'm doing great. And thank you so much for the wishes. And yeah, I'll be there in Jaipur. And I look forward to seeing you, Bhaskar, and everybody else, whoever comes there. I'll be very pleased to meet you all and maybe have some interesting interactions. I look forward to it. Thank you. Sunil Bansal says China built a thorium reactor. What about India? Well, until a few years ago, India was supposed to have the world's most advanced thorium research program. We have this three-stage nuclear program. We are at the end of the first stage, and we are potentially stepping into the second stage. I've spoken about this in detail in the past. What about India? Like I said, with space, we have the capabilities, we have the engineers, we have the know-how, we have the scientists. But do we have the ambition? Does the government have the ambition? I know that we are building more nuclear reactors and all, but thorium. So we have to get through the second stage to reach the thorium stage. The thorium stage is essentially the third stage. We need more drive. We need a surge. What we can do over the next 10 years, why don't we do it in the next 1 year or 3 years? For that, we need drive. We need ambition. We need that thing, right? We don't seem to have it. What can I say? We have the world's largest thorium reserves. 25 to 30% of the entire world's thorium reserves are in India. And they're just sitting there. What can I say? Noshil Sony, thank you very much, sir. No question. But yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate your contribution to the channel. Thank you, Noshil. Karthik says, Grokipedia gives unbiased factual answers on Ram Mandir, Godhra riots, and so on. Have I tried? I have not tried it. But I've seen some screenshots here and there on X, on Twitter. It's clear that Grokipedia is far better than Wikipedia. But is it really unbiased? I will have to see about that. I am very skeptical that it's going to be completely unbiased. It's going to have some subtle biases for sure baked into it. But it is no question about it. It's far better than Wikipedia. Wikipedia is just slanted, open, overt, blatant slant against India. No question. I always keep saying, right, whenever I open up a Wikipedia page for the sake of quickness, I always say that statutory warning, Wikipedia is not necessarily a good source of information, reliable source of information, especially when it comes to India and Indian history. Grokipedia probably is better, but it will still have some subtle inbuilt biases. I guarantee that. But I'll have to see it for myself. And maybe I'll take some screenshots and show you once that happens, once I'm able to do that. Amisha says, Happy birthday, sir. God bless you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. God bless you too. I really appreciate the wishes and your viewership and everything else. Thank you so much. Satellite says, how many GPUs does it take to run one AI? Abhijit. There's no GPUs inside of me. Yeah, anyway. Nice, funny question. I appreciate that, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Dave says Starlink is signing deals with our states now to provide satellite-based internet. What are my views? Why is the government of India allowing it? Happy birthday, sir, in advance. Thank you very much. Why is the government of India allowing it? I do not know why the government of India is allowing this. In my opinion, we should not allow this. I can't speak on behalf of the government of India as to why this is being allowed, but I am of the firm opinion that this should not be allowed. That's all I can say. I can't answer your question because I'm not in the government of India and I'm not privy to the thinking that goes on behind the scenes that gives rise to these decisions. All right. 6P70 Delta says this prediction of $1 equal to rupees 3 was made by Dr. Ankit Shah. Okay, noted, but I am not aware of it. So I can't really uh, comment about it because I've not studied it. I've not seen this. Anyway, thank you for the information. Satellite says, Happy birthday, sir. Thank you so much, Satellite. Thank you so much, everybody else. This brings me to the end of this live stream. Thank you very much. May Bhim bless me. What is that? Okay. All right. So thank you so much. This brings me to the end of this live stream. And this weekend, I want to be doing live streams because I will be in Jaipur. But regular programming resumes next week onwards. And I shall put out some clips in the intervening period. Thank you so much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep raising your standards. See you in the next one. Thank you very much. Take care. Those of you who are coming to Jaipur, I'll see you there. Everybody else, see you soon. Bye bye.